Coming up, a huge compliment for LSU and two of its star defensive players, and some possible good news for Florida on the recruiting trail. We'll deal with it all next, right here on SEC Country Live. Hello everyone, welcome to SEC Country Live. My name is Brandon Adams. This is the former Alabama All-American Mike Johnson. We get ready to close the week for us, at least in a big way, with a fun hour of SEC talk. Glad to have you with us here today, and good to see you too, Mike.
Yeah, it's like I mentioned yesterday, man. We are inching ever so close to that signing day, and it's different this year for the signing day because a lot of these guys are already signed on the dotted line, but it's not without drama. So we'll continue to go into that.
Yeah, we're certainly looking forward to doing all that with you here over the course of the next 60 minutes. Let's get things started, though, with the big news around the SEC. We call it our first and 10. It's the big items of interest in the Southeastern Conference today. And, well, it starts with some very bold statement by some media members, a potential compliment here for the LSU Tigers. Let's kind of dive into all of this. Athlon Sports, one of those great sort of preseason, postseason publications. They do a lot of the preview magazines. I've read a lot of these over the years. They're always a lot of fun to check out. And they've got a ranking coming up of their top players in the country for 2018. And, well, according to their list, Greedy Williams, the LSU cornerback, Brevin White, the LSU linebacker, are actually the highest rated players from the SEC on the list. They're ranking all of college football. I thought that Nick Suss, who covers the LSU Tigers for SECCountry.com, had kind of an interesting statement to make about that. Let me show you what Nick wrote when it comes to, how these guys rank in the SEC. Nick writes that the 2018 season is going to be a weird year for the SEC when it comes to top-tier talent. Between Tua Tagovailoa, Jake Fromm, Missouri's Drew Lock, Auburn's Jarrett Stidham, Mississippi State's Nick Fitzgerald, there are plenty of quarterback talent. Because of that, the conference is going to seem star-studded. But after quarterback, there's a bit of a talent vacuum. Most of the SEC's top rushers are moving on, as are first-rounders like Christian Kirk and Calvin Ridley as wide receivers. Does this create a scenario where White and Williams can be the defensive faces of the conference? Once again, that's Nick Suss, who covers LSU for SEC Country. I'm going to ask you the same thing. White and Williams, the best tandem of not just defensive players, but maybe players in the entire SEC?
When I got here today and I started approaching this topic in my head, I thought to myself, just at first glance, and it's not, anything against these guys, but I thought to myself, man, there's no way that's going to be true. There's got to be. And then I started looking around the conference and I started asking myself, okay, who else would be up there? You can make an argument for a guy like Jeffrey Simmons. You can make an argument for a guy like Raekwon Davis. You can even try to dip into C.C. Jefferson. Florida's got a corner and C.J. Henderson's pretty good. But I do honestly think that these two guys are the best defenders in the conference. When you look around, there's just such a loss of star-studded ability. You could make the argument for other guys, and you can make the argument that in the end, at the end of the season, there's other players in the conference that will be better than these two. You can look at Mack Wilson. You can look at some of the youth on Georgia's defense. But right now, the evidence all points to these two guys being two of the best defenders in the conference. And I'm not sure, other than the guys I just named, that anybody is all that close when you talk about a duo of two guys.
Yeah, Dave Aranda, the LSU defensive coordinator, was on the ESPN radio affiliate in Baton Rouge. T-Bob Hebert, one of the hosts, and the discussion comes up with Aranda of, hey, why'd you stick around LSU? You had a chance to maybe go take some other job, maybe even be a head coach. What was it about Baton Rouge and LSU in particular you wanted to stick around for? And as you might imagine, one of the names that comes up with Aranda is one of the guys we just discussed, Brevin White, the LSU defense. That's what it's all about for Aranda. Here is him from ESPN Radio in Baton Rouge.
Oh, I love the players here. I immediately think of the linebacker core, and I think of Brevin White and the improvements that he's made and his hunger to be a better player. He's at the office before I'm up there on Sundays, wanting to know how he can get better. And so I know he's going to have a great year this next season.
So, what it leads me to wonder, I expect Brevin White to have a great season as well. I expect great things from Greedy Williams. This is probably going to be a good LSU defense. But when you say you potentially have the two top players in the SEC on the same unit, what does that mean for LSU as a team overall? Does it change the outlook for what the Tigers might be able to do? We've said that we think Alabama and Auburn are both top 10 teams in 2018. Is LSU closer to them because of how good we expect Aranda's defense to be?
It's tough to say, but I don't think so. I think they've got two incredibly good defensive players coming back. But I think when you look at what they're losing, and you're going to sit them in there next to obviously John Battle, who gets the extra year, a guy like Grant Delpit, who is a guy who's going to be good for a couple of years to come, who was young last year. But Christian Lacouture, obviously Kevin Tolliver, Dante Jackson, Frank Herron, Corey Thompson, Arden Key, Alexander, Paris. I mean, the list goes on of guys this defense is losing. So, I'm easily going to name them the best duo and the best pair of defenders in the league. But when you look around at LSU's defense next year, they have to be. I mean, there's not a ton with some of these spots that are coming back. So they definitely, as good as you think those two guys are, around them, it is a little bit of a rebuilding job, in my opinion.
Let me hit some comments in the comments section when it comes to these rankings of SEC players or college football players and the SEC guys that fit in there. Bo Molinari, Texas A&M fan, no mention of Nick Starkel, he says. Par for the course on that.
Come on, Bo.
Bo would have liked to have,
didn't even play half the year
like to have seen that. Also in the comment section, Cliff Nelson's obviously excited about that. He's taking a shot at you about something.
I'm not quite
sure.
There. I got back with him.
Michael Clyburn says Jeffrey Simmons, Montez Sweat, pretty good as well. Liking the tandem there for the Mississippi State Bulldogs. Jeremy Pettis also brings up Mac Wilson's name for Alabama. A lot of fans want to see their guys represented here. Scott Johnson, also a Mississippi State fan, talking about Sweat and Jeffrey Simmons, who I think that obviously Simmons is going to have a very good year. Jonathan Harris, an Auburn fan, also mentioning Deshaun Davis and Darrell Williams of Auburn. So this is one of those things where a lot of fan bases say, hey, your tandem may be pretty good. We think ours may have a chance to be better. And that's exactly what you'd come to expect in a situation like this.
It's like I said, at the end of the year, and Sherrod Pat Richardson says, the two corners down there, Wilson and C.J. Henderson, could end up being better than Greedy Williams. And maybe so. I think that those two guys are young. I think those two guys will develop. I think they're going to be better suited and in better condition this year when it comes to those fourth quarter plays and maybe make some better breaks on the ball. But right now, when I was looking at it and we're getting prepared to talk about this, right now there's just not an argument to be made for any other duo. I mean, you can look around and say this guy will be this and this guy will be that. But the bottom line is those guys performed last year at a high level, and they have all the evidence coming in 2018.
But here's my point, though. There is always going to be a nature of subjectivity to who are the best two players in the SEC. I mean, stats can be misleading in this. Eye tests can be misleading in this. We may never know for sure who the two best are. But if it really is true that LSU has an argument for the two best players, then all of a sudden you've got a defense at that point in time that maybe does help you keep pace with even a Mississippi State here, by the way, who is thought to be a top 25 team. Certainly Auburn and Alabama. I mean, there could be, even if the LSU offense struggles as much as I think it might, there could be enough talent to keep LSU in the mix there in the SEC West.
Yeah, I don't know. Mississippi State fans look at it as well, and they say, well, Montez Sweat, Jeffrey Simmons, there's going to be some guy. Leo Lewis is a guy who didn't play that well last year that could end up being a pretty good player for them. Obviously, highly touted recruit when he got to Mississippi State. But, I look around. I love the linebacker combination Alabama's going to have. I love some of the outside guys they're getting back that'll rush the passer after, all the injuries last year. I love Raekwon Davis in the middle for them. I love some of the guys that are going to be coming back for, Ledbetter, and we talk about, some of the corners they're going to get back next year for Georgia. I like some of those combos. But to me, when you look at Greedy Williams, he's as locked down as they come right now in the SEC. So go ahead and sit him out there. And Brevin White's one of those guys that last year we talked about was begging for more roles as a leader on this defense. When everything was going south, this is a sophomore that's stepping up to the challenge. So I just think that right now when you look at it, LSU's got some holes to fill around them, but those are two guys you don't have to worry about, so it makes you feel better about everybody else.
Item number 2 on our SEC country line, 1st and 10. Florida looking to finish strong here on the recruiting trail in the final closeout towards National Signing Day. In fact, Dan Mullen taking the same page from the playbook that guys like Kirby Smart and Nick Saban have done. Helicopters flying all over the South. Mullen wants to be involved in that same kind of stuff here. He's actually landing here at IMG Academy. The Ascenders, I believe, as they are known there. A lot of the work here is for like 2019 kids and beyond. IMG, obviously, among the most talented high school teams in the country every single season. But the helicopter landing from Mullen, an example almost symbolic of what he's trying to do here, which is cover this state of Florida with as many big-time guys as he can get before this upcoming National Signing Day. And one of those guys, I'll admit, is someone that I didn't necessarily think Florida's probably going to get. Nicholas Petit-Frere, the big 5-star offensive lineman. But are you what? I told you.
How'd you say it?
For whatever reason, I cannot say this kid's name. Is it Petit? Is it Frere?
Frere.
Nicholas Frere. I feel like I'm not bad in general pronunciations, and this is not even that hard of a name to pronounce. It's just one of those things where it's sort of like the syllables just sort of combine together for me, and I get him confused with what's the LSU running back's name? Our LSU fans will tell us. I get those two guys confused for whatever reason, and I sort of conflate their names just a little bit. But nonetheless, Florida trying to make the impression here. Chris Kirshner, who covers Alabama recruiting for SEC Country, also Petit Frere in the mix there for Alabama. Here's what Chris Kirshner wrote recently. He said he's talked to a few people during the past few days. It seems like Florida has surged slightly ahead for Petit Frere. If signing day was today, I think he'd be signing with the Gators. I'll admit here, that's not something I expected to hear. And listen, y'all can see I'm wearing the Georgia gear. I obviously prefer a 5-star offensive lineman not to go to Gainesville. I've assumed that it wouldn't happen, but I'm going to have to admit, if Florida can close with Petit Frere, can close with Jacob Copeland, who they have an official visit, the wide receiver, this weekend, there's a chance here that Florida actually closes better with its 2018 recruiting class than I was willing to give it credit for a few days ago.
Yeah, no, I think they are going to close a lot better than most people even imagined was possible. And when you look at some of the other players they're going to get, Dorian Gerald's #1 JUCO defenseman in the country. He looks like he's going to go to the Gators. Noah Boykin, a 4-star corner. Jacob Copeland, you mentioned, I mean, if you look at that guy's Twitter account, it's all Florida stuff. It's all about Orange. He's doing the Gator chomp. I mean, obviously, he's looking at some other places and looking at Alabama and Tennessee, but I think Florida's kind of the team to beat in that situation as well. So if you talk about those 4 guys signing on the dotted line this next week with Florida, I don't think there's another way to spin it that Dan Mullen has had one of the better transition classes in recent memory when you talk about coaches that have taken over programs that were as bad as Florida was last year.
Well, he'll certainly be proving himself to be a better recruiter than Jim McElwain was proving himself to be at Florida. Not only, if this class could add a Petit Frere, Jacob Copeland, guys like that, then it's going to make a push for the top 10. That's something that that's something that Jim McElwain never did while he was at Florida. And McElwain's first class, going back to 2015, finished outside the top 20. So from that standpoint, Mullen would be doing much better than Jim McElwain had ever done there. And it's the kind of thing that, I've always said, what did McElwain in at Florida was his recruiting. If he's a better recruiter there, he's probably still the coach. More so than anything else, that was his big problem. And Dan Mullen would be taking a step towards correcting that. And also maybe answering some of the critics who say, can a former Mississippi State coach who's taken a bunch of junior college kids and very few, in some cases, 4- and 5-star guys, can he recruit at a level in the SEC where really 4- and 5-star guys are what you should be bringing in at every position?
Yeah, I agree. I think it's crazy when we look at what the talking point was last week. Jawan Sider decides to move on. I think he headed up to Penn State, the tight ends coach from Florida, and you think, man, this guy was an ace recruiter. He was a guy that had a ton of links to the state of Florida. Can Dan Mullen really navigate his way around this and head towards signing day and still make a strong finish? The answer is yes. Dan Mullen seemingly
the answer is maybe. Come on, the answer is maybe.
The answer is yes. The answer is that he's going to have a decent signing class for a team in a transition year. That's the bottom line. He's going to have a top 5 team in the SEC. It's maybe not up to Florida standards, but it's still a pretty good class when it's all said and done, specifically if they get Petit Frere on campus.
But you have to win with somebody. You have to win with the Copeland. You have to win with the Petit Frere. You got to win with some of these guys here before the end to start, touting yourself. Ed Orgeron was a top 10 class a year ago. Kirby Smart was a top 10 class in his first year in the 2016 class. It's not unheard of for first-year coaches to have top 10 classes. That's a bar not set too high for Dan Mullen here. He's got to get some wins to get in the top 10, but if he does, then we'll call it a success. But you don't call 16th in the country a success at Florida.
Well, no, what I'm saying is that it's better than Jim McElwain was. It's a step in the right direction. It continues kind of trending towards where you want Florida to be.
Yeah.
I'm not saying they're going to go out and win an SEC championship next year.
But that's not what I'm talking about either.
Yeah, I think when you look at Petit Frere and Jacob Copeland, the fact that Florida's the team to beat right now with 6 days left until signing day, I think that signifies all you need to know as a Florida fan. I think that if they weren't even in the talking point with some of these players, then you probably are, starting to ask your questions about Dan Mullen. But these guys are making a push. Whether or not they sign him, to me, is a different deal. Mm-hmm. The fact that they're even in the conversation at this point with these guys that are quality players is a big deal.
All right, let me hit a few comments on the comment section. Chris Smith says, Mike, stop saying Florida's doing anything right. BA can't take it. I'm the one who started this thing off by saying something good about Florida. Now, that's not quite fair. I said something good about Florida to start.
Well, yeah.
But you're trying to give them the trophy before the race is over.
You think I'm trying to give them a participation trophy is what you're saying. They haven't gotten the recruits yet. But the fact that I think they will.
I feel like what I said was incredibly fair. Chris Kirshner, who knows SEC recruiting, says they're the leader for Petit Frere. I said, if you win with that big 5-star guy right there, I'm going to give you credit. That's not a recruiting battle I thought you're going to win. But you're acting like he's already inked before. He's visiting Ohio State this weekend. The hay is not in the barn.
My point is that 2 weeks ago, nobody in the world thought they had a chance of getting Petit Frere. Florida fans did, obviously, but outside of that, you look at it and say, man, Ohio State, Alabama's going after him. Is this really a guy that Dan Mullen can even get? And now all of a sudden, he's the leader a week out from signing day. I'm giving that a win for Dan Mullen. Whether or not he signs on the dotted line, the fact that he's a leader 6 days out for me signifies that Dan Mullen's doing some of the right things.
But okay, I don't want to get too deep in the weeds on this, but what you're describing is the thing I want to give Tennessee credit for. A program that historically is not quite as good a recruiting program as Florida is, and probably a little farther away from success than Florida is. Florida won the East 2 years in a row just a season ago. So I will give some participation trophies to Tennessee. They got Tyson Campbell to visit there. That's a nice token gesture, even though Campbell's not going to go there. They may or may not win with some of these other guys there in the mix for. They had Copeland, who we just talked about, on campus. They're probably not going to win with him, but that's a pretty good gesture on Tennessee's part to even get that visit. I'm ready to give Tennessee some of those sort of token gesture credits. Florida's Florida. They got to win with guys. You got to sign guys.
So you're saying that Florida just historically is better in recruiting than
better
Tennessee.
Program than Tennessee.
So you hold them to a higher standard.
That's a much higher standard.
I
think Florida fans hold themselves to a higher standard.
Well, they should. Obviously, Florida fans are going to hold themselves to a higher standard. I think every fan base hold themselves to a higher standard than most people do. But I'm telling you right now, when we talked about this last week, the feeling was that none of these guys are going to go to Florida, and the fact is, some of them are going to go to Florida, and the fact that they're leaders at this point, I think, is a big deal. It's like I said, I don't know that they signed there, but I think that they're in the conversation right now in a transition year under Dan Mullen tells me a lot.
Rick Keene says, "Quit hating, BA. What is being said is he's doing better than the new coaches." I gave him credit for that. I'm the one that said that he's doing well. He's doing better than McElwain. He has a chance to finish strong, and if you want to hear me say that I may be wrong, I mean, I told you the other day I didn't think they were getting any of these guys. They may get a few, and that's a pretty good job by Dan Mullen, which does make him formidable in the future. That'd be a pretty good showing for a first-year coach. Probably not quite as good as Orgeron a year ago, probably not quite as good as Kirby in 2016, but a pretty good showing for a first-year coach.
Greg Steele says, wait, BA giving prop to Tennessee for not getting recruits? Huh? And the thing, I mean, like, I understand what you're saying. You hold, Florida in a higher esteem when it comes to recruiting, but I just think that, to me, these teams are both in a similar spot with new head coaches. They're teams in the East that are trying to battle back to get to the top, and the fact that they're in conversations with these players, with these top-flight players in transition years, to me, signifies that they're still heading in the right direction.
Arlen Block's a Georgia fan. Even he's jumping in on me. He says, BA just can't give Florida any credit, LOL. I feel like I was giving him credit. The whole point of the whole topic was, I mean, when I was sort of planning this out today, I said, you know what? I'm going to throw Florida a bone here. I'm going to say, hey, good job getting in the mix with a five-star guy I didn't think you'd get in the mix with. And even that's not enough. Y'all aren't motivating me to say anything nice about Florida. I can promise you that. This is saying something nice about Florida.
You got to go the extra step, man. It's
what, give them credit before they sign?
Well, it did. Look, okay, so last week when we were talking about Jawan Sider, and we were talking about him leaving to go to Penn State, and I brought up the names of like 3 prospects. Can't even remember who they were, and you're like, he's not going to Florida. He's not going to Florida.
One of them was Copeland. One of them was
Petit Freer. And now they're leading for those guys.
And that's I mean, look, we don't know who's
what
actually
you're saying.
leading.
Giving me 6. You're saying 6 days. Come back and talk to me next week after signing day.
But you're right. When we brought this up, I told you that guy's not going to Florida. That guy's not going to Florida. And now I'm saying,
can't remember who the other guy was.
Maybe they are going to Florida. Therefore, it could be that Dan Mullen's going to finish a lot stronger than we thought. I'm saying there's a chance I was wrong. But if you want me to fall on the sword and be wrong before signing day, that's not going to happen.
It's not going to happen just yet. Right. Well, the comment section is lit on fire right now.
Good gracious,
Cliff Nelson said the only thing Florida deserves credit for is being a dumpster fire. So,
well, there you go. Yeah. We'll keep weighing in on this throughout the program here on SEC Country Live. By the way, let's move on here to item number 3 on our SEC Country Live, 1st and 10. And I am amazed at how much fascination exists around the Georgia program with Justin Fields, the 5-star quarterback who comes in as an early enrollee. And the assumption on the part of many members of the media that Fields might push Jake Fromm, the incumbent starting quarterback. Now, part of this is based on the fact that Fields is a pretty good prospect, but also part of this is based on the fact that in Kirby Smart's 2 years at Georgia, he started a true freshman quarterback in both of those years, at least for the majority of the snaps of the season. Let me show you a few of what some folks have been saying when it comes to Justin Fields here. Let me start with Chris Johnson from SI.com, who in a list of sort of impact freshman quarterbacks said about Justin Fields and the relationship with Jake Fromm that he proved he's legit this season by guiding the Bulldogs to an SEC title in the national championship game while laying waste to the notion that he's a mere game manager. And in most circumstances, that'd be enough for a quarterback to guaranteed walk into fall camp without having to worry about securing his place on the depth chart. Chris Johnson goes on to say there, or maybe not, but basically Johnson's talking. Oh, here he is. That may ultimately be true, but if Fields really is the special run-pass dynamo with a Cam Newton-type ceiling, and scouting reports suggest he might be, then Fromm's going to need to maintain, if not elevate, the form he flashed last season to avoid being Tua Tagovailoa'd as a sophomore, turning Tua's name into a verb there. So, I mean, Chris Johnson says that Fromm's got to be even better than he was in 2017, or Fields may pass him up. I mean, listen, you haven't watched every high school snap that Justin Fields has ever taken. None of us have. But does that ring true to you that Fields could possibly beat out a quarterback that just played as well as Jake Fromm played a season ago?
I think it's definitely possible. I don't know that it's probable. I mean, I think when you look at Jake Fromm and you look at the quality snaps he's gotten, and remember, this was not an easy deal for Jake Fromm. I mean, this was not probable what happened last year with Jake Fromm. And so I look at the situation with Fields, and the question is, can he throw as well as Jake Fromm but move around as good as, say, a Jalen Hurts? I mean, that's really the combination we've been talking about when we've been talking up Justin Fields as one of the #1 quarterbacks, the #1 dual-threat quarterback in the country for the last year. Does that combination elevate him? I mean, when you look at what Jim Chading wants to do offensively, is a dual-threat quarterback in this offense what gets them to the next level and wins a national title? And if ultimately the answer is yes, then I can for sure see Justin Fields at some point moving in front this year.
Very sarcastic comment from Rick Keene, who's a Florida fan. He says, hey, how's Fromm going to win the Heisman Trophy if he gets pushed up a true freshman? Listen, I'm not even supposed to laugh at that, Rick, but I got to tell you that's pretty funny. But here's the thing. It's not just Chris Johnson at SI talking about Fields maybe pushing out Fromm. You've also got Sam Kahn, the writer from ESPN, who calls Fields Georgia's most important freshman. All the way too early top 25 teams kind of had a freshman highlighted. Kahn highlighted Justin Fields. He says, last season taught us not to automatically assume that just because a quarterback played well as a true freshman at Georgia, that he can't be unseated the next season. That's not to say Fields, who's the #1 player in the ESPN 300, is automatically going to overtake Fromm at Georgia. But with Jacob Eason transferring out, Fields enrolling early, Fields going to have the opportunity to compete with Fromm and probably see the field, even if it's a reserve role early on. This is going to be one to watch, Sam Kahn says at ESPN. Here's my point on this, and I think you'll agree with me, that, you know, Sam Kahn, Chris Johnson, all those guys, when they talk up Fields, they're talking about his athleticism, his ability to run, his ability to throw. But what Fromm praised about, what Kirby Smart praised about Jake Fromm a year ago wasn't those kinds of things. It was his knowledge of the offense and his ability to understand how to read SEC defenses. Let me give you a clip from about this time a year ago that gives you an idea of, at the time, why Smart thought Fromm was the kind of quarterback who could play early.
He understands the offense really well. Okay, so he knows the system. He understands what coverages he's seeing. I'm excited about Jake Fromm. I mean, the guy's grown up a lot in 15 practices. He's got a lot of things to work on, though. He's still got deer in the headlights when somebody comes free in that pocket and he wants to just sit there and hold the ball. If he had been live today, he'd have got stroked a few times. But I am excited about the things he can do.
So that's Kirby back in the springtime talking about Jake Fromm. And my point here is, I think that Fields is not going to redshirt. He's too good not to play in some form or fashion. He's at the very least Georgia's primary backup. He'll probably play some in non-mop-up duty in 2018 as well, just because that's what you do with five-star guys here in this kind of year. But until we hear Smart talking about Fields and his knowledge of defenses, his knowledge of the Georgia playbook, that we don't really have the same kind of clues that Fields is ready to make the same kind of freshman impact that Fromm was able to make a year ago. If Smart is saying those things, there's a chance he might be. But if he is saying those things, then maybe Fields is in the mix. But until Kirby talks about Fields the way that he just talked about Fromm, I don't quite think that this year is like last year.
Well, I mean, you know, let's get him on campus. Let's get him some reps. Let's get him
he's
in a
on
Georgia
campus now.
Let's get him in a Georgia practice uniform. Let's get him through spring ball, and then let's kind of visit with Kirby and see what it is. I think the thing I keep falling back to, and listen, we had this conversation a million times last year about Tua Tagovailoa, is he too good to ride the pine for 3 years behind Jalen Hurts? He's not going to wait for 3 years until he gets his snap and is able to play as a senior. It's just not going to happen. The guy's too good to kind of wait around. So my question is, if Justin Fields doesn't crack the field this year, if they don't find a place for him on the offense, then when does it come? Because I don't think it's going to happen. He's just not the kind of guy that's going to sit on the pine for 3 years and wait till Jake Fromm graduates.
Completely agree. Completely agree. I think the most likely scenario is he definitely plays as a backup, and if Georgia's beating teams the way that Dog fans hope they do, that gives him a chance to play. I think he also plays more than that. Special packages, I don't know that necessarily has to be red zone, but just, you know, opportunities during the game. The kind of show some of what he's able to do off. I think he definitely will play, but the issue comes to, is there a chance that he's better than Fromm? And when I'm telling you that we don't have any evidence of that until Kirby Smart speaks about Fields and his knowledge of the defenses and the playbook, the way that he spoke about Fromm a year ago. Because it was this time in the winter, right after Fromm early enrolled, that he actually embraced the kind of work that I think made it possible for him to take the starting job once Jacob Eason got injured.
What's shocking about that to me is, we don't need any evidence to start a quarterback controversy. We do this all the time. We go down this road all the time with some of these quarterback situations, and it almost never, once you have the inkling, and once a guy's a five-star, and once you see what the other quarterback was before him, and you kind of know what that guy is, it's like a runaway train at that point. And so the Justin Fields talking points are going to be there. And I think as soon as he gets in a uniform, you will hear Kirby Smart praise him. You've heard too many other people praise Justin Fields not to know that he's going to be a decent player.
Quick final question from me to you on this, and I don't mean to put you on the spot, but quarterback controversies are also born because the guy that's got the football in his hand doesn't do with it what he's supposed to. Is there a chance that Fromm in 2018 is not as good as he was in 2017?
I think there's for sure a good chance of that. I think when you look around what Jake Fromm was, he had the ability to develop, and he was a very good quarterback at the end of the year, but early on in the year, he is handing the ball off a ton. He's allowing the running game to go to work. He's allowing that offensive line to go to work in front of him. Are you going to get the same production? I tend to think you will up front. I think you've got obviously quality offensive linemen. I think you're going to have quality young running backs, but Jake Fromm's going to have to carry a little bit more of the torch. So if that offense is a little bit more on his shoulders and he is asked to make a little more throws down the stretch, I don't think it's out. I don't think it's out of the question that you look at it and say, man, maybe his interceptions go up just a little bit, and maybe he's not as efficient as he was this year.
Matt Morrell says Fields is the Tua of late last year. Good enough to start, but the head coach stays loyal with Fromm. The truth is, and listen, I don't mean to stir up trouble here, Jake Fromm's better than Jalen Hurts. So, Fields may be Tua, but I don't know that Fromm's going to give the same opportunity to be unseated the way that Jalen Hurts did for Alabama.
Well, I think that's fair. I think that Jake Fromm, when you look at what Jalen Hurts was throwing the ball, the question you have to ask yourself is, what does Jim Chaney want to do with this offense? This is what I keep going back to.
Yeah.
There's so many different dynamics you can develop with a guy like Justin Fields and his athleticism. You just can't with Jake Fromm. You can't move the pocket like you would with Jake Fromm. You can't get an extra blocker on some of the short yardage situations with Jake Fromm. It's just not going to happen. So there's such a different dynamic to having Justin Fields on the field that I think it's definitely something they have to look at.
Dedrick Frazier says you couldn't do any kind of special packages with Jacob Eason, but Justin Fields brings you different kind of dynamic. You may be able to do just that. All right, item number 4 here on SEC Country Live, our first and 10. We talked about Tennessee recruiting a little earlier, and there is maybe a chance for Tennessee to make another big splash here on National Signing Day. I quoted from Chris Kirshner earlier, who covers Alabama recruiting for SECCountry.com. Chris also weighing in on Quay Walker. What Chris writes, and Chris covers Alabama recruiting, he says 4-star linebacker Quay Walker's commitment to Alabama remains shaky at best. I don't see him sticking with the Crimson Tide at this point. Kirshner goes on to say Saban was in Cordial, Georgia. That's Walker's hometown, Tuesday night. Head coaches only get one in-home visit, so that's going to be the last face-to-face contact with Walker. Georgia assistant coaches visited Walker on Tuesday. Auburn coach Gus Malzahn, Tennessee coach Jeremy Pruitt expected to stop by this week too. Walker's going to visit Georgia this weekend. I think Walker's recruitment comes down to Georgia and Tennessee. Well, speaking of Tennessee, Blake Morgan, who covers Tennessee recruiting for SEC Country, also weighed in on Quay Walker. Tennessee coach Jeremy Pruitt is, as Kirshner said, going to go in home with Walker this week. Going to try to seal the deal at that time. Walker said he looks forward to being coached by Pruitt while he was the defensive coordinator at Alabama. Tennessee's also aided by Walker's friendship with Vols commit J.J. Peterson. That's the big pass rusher from Colquitt County down in southwest Georgia. I believe Walker's going to sign with Tennessee next week. It's a pretty bold prediction from Blake Morgan saying that Tennessee's going to flip Quay Walker from Alabama. You've got your ear to the ground on this. You're trying to listen to as much as anybody's saying here. Is this a possibility? And how big of a win for Tennessee would this be if they could get another, in this case, an Alabama commit? They've already gotten a commitment from an Alabama lean. How big would this be for Jeremy Pruitt?
I think it's a huge deal. To me, it's right along the lines of Florida trying to get Jacob Copeland right now. I think that this, obviously, what we were talking about earlier, this signifies a kind of changing of the guard in terms of what Jeremy Pruitt's trying to do recruiting-wise. And let's get this knocked out of the way. I know Alabama fans aren't going to like me saying this. This guy's not going to Alabama. Chris Kirshner kind of lays it out right there right now. I know he's an Alabama commit, But this is a kid who has very bluntly said, I want early playing time. It's the first thing he looks at. And the fact of the matter is, when you look at the linebacking core for Alabama next year, there's just not a spot for him. I mean, there's just not. They're too deep on the outside of the edge from all the injuries they had last year. In the middle is going to be Dylan Moses and Mac Wilson. There's just not a spot for Quay Walker next year at Alabama. So he's looking elsewhere. He's looking at Tennessee saying, man, they're going to revamp their defense. He's looking at the linebacking core from Georgia saying, man, I could get some early playing time on a good team at a place like that. So he's not going to Alabama. When you look at Tennessee, I have to think this would be one of the bigger recruiting wins of the year for Jeremy Pruitt.
Let me take this from two sides. I'll start with the Tennessee side of this in a moment. You know, it was not that long ago on this show we were talking about Greg Schiano and John Curry, and you know, the phrase dumpster fire gets thrown around. I think it's even been used by one of our commenters on today's show. Tennessee was a legitimate dumpster fire not that long ago. If you're closing out signing day in 2018 by signing a guy that was an Alabama commit, Quay Walker to go along with J.J. Peterson, people of that regard, all that John Curry, Greg Schiano, Butch Jones mess, that is all so far in the past. I'm not telling you that Pruitt's going to win a national championship in Tennessee. I'm not even going to tell you he's even going to win the East. I'm not guaranteeing you anything like that. I'm telling you he brought a better class to Tennessee than anybody else would in the same circumstance.
No, I completely agree. And it's all about relationships with him. That's what's been so impressive about it. Is you hear these guys, and J.J. Peterson was another one of them, obviously them being good friends, that talk about their relationship with Jeremy Pruitt. And when he left Alabama, it all of a sudden opened up all these other doors because the word trust is used. There's all these words that they're using about Jeremy Pruitt, talking about the relationship they've built, and he's done it at Alabama, and he's continued to do that in a short period of time at Tennessee. So I use this, and I look at it, and I start to project the future for Tennessee. And when you look at guys like Kevin Sher and some of the other guys they have on staff, I don't see any reason why they won't continue to build these relationships with these young guys. Tennessee has offered a ton of young players here in the last 2 months, and I have to think those relationships are going to go through the roof with Jeremy Pruitt over the next couple of years.
So the other side of this is the Alabama thing for a moment. I think I agree with you that one way or another, I don't expect Quay Walker to go to Alabama. It's sort of hard to figure out what's left for Alabama here in the 2018 cycle. You know, some flirtation with Patrick Surtain Jr., Isaac Taylor-Stewart, Tyson Campbell, all five-star cornerbacks. Nicholas Petit-Frere, the big offensive lineman who may be among Alabama's biggest targets left here before the 2018 cycle's done. There's a chance that Alabama doesn't get any of the four names that I just mentioned.
Yeah.
They didn't sign a ton of guys in December. I think Saban was hoping for a good close here in February. Is there a chance that the Alabama class ends up being disappointing?
Well, it depends on what you call it disappointing. I think, if a top 10 class is going to be disappointing to you, and it will be to a ton of Alabama fans because they've been on top for so long, I think that, that's probably what you're looking at. I don't know if they crack the top five. I think that you've got to land Isaac Taylor-Stewart. I think you've got to land, another quality four-star type guy. That class is ranked as like number 7 right now, and that's with Quay Walker as a commit. And like I said, he's not going to go to Alabama in my mind. So they have to find some of these guys from around the country to start closing that gap. And you've seen Bama all of a sudden with a flourish lately start offering guys, start offering linebackers, start offering quarterbacks. They've offered a few quarterbacks here in the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, late in the process to be offering 2018 kids. That's a red flag for me a little bit.
No, I think it is too. I think that it's like set our sights high, and then it's like, okay, now maybe we need to go look at a fallback plan in some of these situations. I still think they finish somewhere around 6th or 5th when it's all said and done. I think they're going to get some quality players.
They're going to get Malik Langham almost.
Yeah, they're going to get Malik Langham. They're going to get some other guys. I still would not be shocked if they end up with Justin Ross. Yeah,
that's another big name.
And that's a big name. Like I said, I still think they wind up like 5th in the country. But if you're talking about being disappointed, it's not going to be even close to being a number 1 or number 2 recruiting class.
Be something interesting to watch. I'm number 5 here in SEC Country Live, our first and 10 list. I think this is a really interesting story. You don't see this kind of stuff pop up a lot, but you mentioned, kind of getting the mix late for some quarterbacks. Alabama is. One of those guys is Brevin White, who right now slated to go to Princeton. Now, here's the thing, and many of you are aware of this, but in the Ivy League, there are no athletic scholarships.
Right.
So if you go to Princeton, you're paying your way. I guess you could get some aid there. White, as high school coach, seems to think that he might be able to do that, but Alabama has kind of come in late. They've offered him a scholarship. So you can go play football at Alabama or go be the quarterback for Princeton, one of the most prestigious schools in the country. Here's what Brevin White, the quarterback who's facing this decision, says about what his quarterback's going to be dealing with here. Dean Harrington is his name. He says he, meaning Brevin White, wasn't really looking at other schools until Alabama came around. He wasn't anticipating it. It's Alabama, it's Nick Saban, they're great contacts there, just like at Princeton. When he's done playing, he loved the trip. His parents loved it. Now he's debating, do I want to go be a part of a program like Alabama, or a academic institution like Princeton? What a great debate.
Yeah.
What's the right choice here?
Well, I'm going to say Alabama. Obviously, I think when you talk about being a football player and you talk about being a quarterback, it's such a tough choice. I mean, especially for a kid that's out in Lancaster, California, where he's at Paraclete High School. It's just like, Princeton opens up so many doors, but so does Alabama too. And obviously two very different directions when you talk about going on to the next level there. I have to think that you look at what Princeton can do for the rest of your life, and I have to think you look at the quarterback room in Alabama right now, and you think, man, I've got to second guess what's going on, and with a couple of different situations. But obviously, I'm rooting for a guy like Brevin White to wind up at Alabama. And I think the most interesting part of this for me is that this guy is like a true pro-style quarterback, 6'2", like 190.
Yeah. Says that they like him because he can read multiple progressions of the field.
He can, obviously, and he's pretty smart because
I didn't know Alabama was into that kind of thing anymore.
It's getting ready to be that way. You saw Tua in the game. He looks right, and then he progresses left.
Yeah, you did see that.
I don't know.
You did see
Anybody
that.
caught that one. That was a big play.
Go on, talk about this kid. We're not talking
Anyways,
about that
I am hoping this guy winds up at Alabama, but by no means, if he does not choose Alabama, will I be like, oh man, this kid made the wrong choice. There's just no bad choices there.
In the comment section, Jamie Bailey says, don't forget, Princeton had some strong football teams back in the 1800s. That's a good point here.
That's a very good point.
Chad Clark says, you want to go to Princeton if you want to get the better education. But here's the thing, and I know I'm going to sound like a knucklehead for saying this. Sometimes this education thing's overrated. You go to college to get they're laughing at me. You go to college to get a job, right?
Yeah.
Like take the pool of people who are Alabama quarterbacks. Take the pool of people who are Princeton graduates. Compositely, who's doing better in life? The former Alabama quarterbacks or all the Princeton graduates? I mean, A.J. McCarron's got a sushi restaurant. Guys going to play in the NFL. They're all going to have, Jay Barker's on the radio. I mean, like the former Alabama quarterbacks are not doing so bad for themselves professionally speaking.
Well, listen, I would love to jump on the bandwagon, but I think the thing you have to be tough with is, look at the third-string quarterbacks from Alabama the last few years.
I bet they're doing pretty well.
They're doing okay, but
I bet they're doing pretty well.
It's more, to me, about the relationships you build when you're there. You're going to meet so many people at Alabama. You're going to meet so many people at Princeton, and it depends on where you want to go in life and what career you want, in my opinion. I would love to jump on the bandwagon and be like,
I guarantee you there are thousands of guys that graduate from Princeton who are unhappy right now.
Oh, probably so.
Got $1 million worth of debt. Job prospects are dim. They know a lot about like British literature and stuff, but they don't. But you're not getting the job market. Alabama quarterback, that prepares you for life. You tell me you can't walk into like one of these banking institutions in Birmingham, something like that, and say, "Hey, I was on the Alabama team. Here's a picture of me wearing the uniform. I was third-string quarterback. How about a job?"
Blow that up behind your desk. You
don't think that opens doors?
There's people. Oh,
I mean, look at you. You were an offensive lineman. You get to work next to me every day. Imagine where you'd be if you were a quarterback.
What a great thing. Yeah, I don't know how I walked into this seat. No, listen, I totally agree. I mean, obviously, Greg McElroy's all over SC Network, and John Parker Wilson's doing very well in his career. AJ's still in the NFL. So you've had a lot of guys successful. I just don't know that I'm ready to sit there and look at Princeton and be like, ho-hum, it might open some doors, might not. That's a pretty good spot.
Greg McElroy as well. He's working for the SEC Network. Thank you, Hannah, for saying that in our ear. Mickey Elliott says, they're called student athletes. Only a Georgia guy would say education's overrated. Thanks, Mickey. Bo Molinari says, BA is right. I met a lot of girls working their MRS degree. You know what that is, right? He also says a lot of fellows working their BAL. What is that? I don't know that.
I don't know.
I'm probably not. See, I am a Georgia guy. I'm probably not smart enough to even know what that is. Jerry Lewis takes a shot at the Alabama academics. Listen, look, life is your ultimate teacher here. I mean, how many classes did you have in college? And this is not a joke. How many classes did you have in college where you're like, thank goodness I learned that because it's helped me so much now?
I mean,
I can give you a Princeton degree, but you're still going to have to earn your own career once you get out of there.
No, I mean, and it is funny, too, because, listen, let's be honest, too. There's just not a ton of places around the SEC that can really beat their chest about academics. I mean, let's be honest here. Are we really talking about anywhere that's Ivy League, maybe other than Vanderbilt? I mean, there's not a ton of top.
So Bo Molinari gives some clarification. He said he's seen plenty of guys in college working their BAL. I asked him what that was. He said blood alcohol. I have seen a few of those as well. Although, listen, I'm sure that some of those, what do you call those, clubs in Princeton that all those presidents and stuff are part of, I'm sure they're getting plenty drunk there as well. All right, anyway, let's move on here to item number 6. So the bottom line is, I think the kid should go to Alabama. If Nick Saban's sort of like the president. If he asks you to serve, you have to say yes.
I have to agree with that. I mean, listen, there are guys this year that have said no to that, though, and I think that It's tougher for me. Like, if it was like between Alabama and Washington State, which is another team I think offered him, I'd say, oh, they got to go to Alabama on this one. But Princeton, to me, just carries a little bit of swagger in a different direction.
Joshua Finch says, us Bama engineers turn out great. So that's a guy saying, I went to Bama. I got a pretty good career out of that.
No, I agree with you.
You know what?
Josh Finch.
I've actually talked myself into this. If Brevin White doesn't go to Alabama, he doesn't want to compete.
Listen, I love that. I love that entire topic.
That may be him calling right now. Sorry about that.
Yeah.
This show's flying off the rails here very quick.
Okay.
All right, let me move on to another quarterback. Item number 6 here on our SEC Country Life 1st and 10. And boy, LSU needs one, and they are going hard to get one here in the final stages before National Signing Day. An entire host of LSU coaches showing up in Montgomery, Alabama, including Coach Ed Orgeron to visit with James Foster, really one of the top uncommitted quarterbacks left for the 2018 class. You see Orgeron in the middle, Foster to his left, some family members flanking Foster on both sides here, all the way from the boot, he says. An obvious reference to the state of Louisiana. This, to me, is a pretty strong showing by the LSU coaches and a necessary one. I don't know how good Foster's going to be. I know he's the best quarterback left. And LSU needs to do everything it can to get him.
Well, you got LSU, you got Texas A&M that's going to go after him. Florida State obviously is still in the conversation. And I think, to me, when you're James Foster, I just have to think at some point that somebody's going to look at this LSU situation and be like, I can be a hero on campus down at LSU. Yeah. I mean, you just have to feel that way. It's been so long since there's been an extremely quality quarterback at LSU that if a guy like James Foster really wants to go somewhere where he can take over the program and be the man on campus and be a guy that can walk in and maybe not start immediately, but he can have a long career at LSU, I have to think they've got to be the leader in those situations. You look at what they've got in the quarterback room at Texas A&M is pretty good. What they've got in the quarterback room at a place like Florida State is pretty good. We don't have any idea what they really have in the quarterback room at LSU. And I think if I'm James Foster, I'm taking a hard look at Baton Rouge and saying, this program has an incredible fan base, a ton of athleticism on their team. They've got seemingly pointed in the right direction, and I want to go compete and be the quarterback there.
He's got choices of LSU. Alabama's still in the mix here as well, although I guess, according to Chris Kirshner, Brevin White may be their top choice right now. Texas A&M's in the mix. I'd want to play for Fisher if I could, because Fisher has tutored so many great college quarterbacks, sent a lot of guys in the first round of the NFL draft. But I also know that A&M's got, as you said, a pretty deep roster of quarterbacks right now, and they're going to have great quarterbacks in the future because A&M has always recruited that position pretty well. Given that as the backdrop, I might be tempted to go LSU because I do have the open chance of playing time, but I have no idea who 146-year-old Steve Ensminger, what kind of offensive coordinator he's going to be. I mean, I don't. The guy hasn't called plays since the early 90s.
He just said he was 146.
I mean,
you have.
I
think that's the scary thing. I think that is, to me, that would be the only reason you look at it and say, man, this might not be the destination I want to go. Because I think you look at what Willie Taggart could probably do with you at Florida State. I think that obviously Jimbo Fisher, in the end, when you look offensively at what you're going to be looking at Texas A&M, they're going to have a good offense at some point in the near future. I don't know that it's next year, but it's going to be in the near future. I just think that at some point, somebody's got to take the reins on the LSU job. Now, Steve Ensminger, you look at that and say, I'm not really sure what I'm getting myself into, but I think that's a risk. If I was in James Foster's shoes, that's a risk I'm willing to take.
Victor Figueroa brings up a good point. I don't know why receivers go to LSU. They can't get the ball without a quarterback. It's true. I mean, they got Terrace Marshall. They may still get what? Justin Ross may still go there. But they've at least already got another 5-star in Marshall who's on his way in. I mean, they get receivers every dadgum year. That may also be another thing that says to James Foster, hey, I'm actually going to be the guy that goes there and delivers the football to them.
Yeah, I know. Listen, why would you go to LSU if you're a receiver, can't nobody get to him? Look at how many receivers from LSU have been good in the NFL. I mean, there's been receivers. I mean, there's been a lot. So I think that's the reason you go to a place like LSU, because you can compete against some of the best defensive backs in the country on a day-to-day basis. You might not have the guy throwing you in the right spot, but you're going to learn how to release off the line of scrimmage there.
Esteban Estevez says he called plays last year, meaning Steve Ensminger. Esteban's, of course, an LSU fan, with someone else's playbook and got more production out of it. So I don't know when he called plays, but he certainly. These LSU fans seem to really like Ensminger.
Yeah, he called plays when Orgeron was interim coach last year when Les Miles
back in 2016.
Yeah, when Les Miles got fired
back in
2016. And he did a good job. I mean, they were producing a ton of points. So that's where the green light is on that.
Well, there you go. That settles that then. Item number 7 here on our SEC Country Life 1st and 10. Former Florida players apparently very impressed with what Dan Mullen's doing at Florida. I thought this was really interesting. Kiwan Ratliff, who just went into the Florida Hall of Fame, was a guest on the Florida podcast with our buddy Zach Abelverde and Jeff Cardozo down there. Kiwan had a chance to spend a little time with new Florida coach Dan Mullen, and boy, he likes what he's seeing, and he says Gator fans are going to as well. Here's a little bit of Ratliff on that subject.
You know, you read the things online and on the social media and things about the kids being excited and the coaches being excited. It's always good to read, but it's something else to actually see for yourself. And this weekend I had a chance to go up and sit down and watch them and observe, to see it for myself, and I promise you, Gator Nation will be excited for what he has in store.
Ratliff likes what he hears there. I think winning over former players is important for coaches like Dan Mullen. I know there may be some sort of cynical that might say, what else is he supposed to say? But the truth is, hearing those kinds of things, those sort of glowing words from a former player, I think that's a pretty good step in the right direction for Dan Mullen.
I do too, and you know, we talk about a place that is, you know, likes to call themselves DBU, and you know, obviously LSU fans in the comment section will have something to say about that. But they are a team that has had great safeties, great corners. So I think to hear from a guy who's been, you know, on a team like that and can talk about Dan Mullen and can talk about the preparation that he feels like is going on. This to me, and this is a conversation we've been having for the last 3 weeks. Florida, to me, continues to trend in the right direction. And there's just nothing. I mean, we talk about Butch Jones at Tennessee. There was always whisperings about how he handled former NFL players that were coming back, and you know who was allowed at practice and who was going to be able to watch what. The fact that Dan Mullen and you know this former NFL player from Florida have a good kind of communication, or at least he's feeling good about where he is, to me, this is another step in the right direction.
The other thing that Ratliff says here, and I think this is the most important audio clip, and I think this is very quickly going to become the dominant narrative from Florida about how they want Dan Mullen viewed. Here is Kiwan Ratliff again talking about what he likes about Mullen there in Gainesville.
I mean, anytime you can have a coach come in that's been there before and knows the lay of the land is always a bonus. But the icing on the cake is that he was actually one of the guys behind 2 national championships while he was there. So he not only knows the lay of the land, but he knows what it takes and the players that it takes, and he has the vision to get it back to exactly where it was when he left. Because if you really think about it, when Dan Mullen left, it seems like our offense left with him back in, what was it, 08, 07, 08? Yeah. I mean, we've been searching for an exciting, you know, that fun offense that Urban Meyer and Dan Mullen and Coach Spurrier and the Gator fans were used to, and hopefully with him knowing exactly what it takes and going after the guys that he sees fit, our program will be back up and running on the offensive side of the ball in no time.
So it's those two things, but the last thing in particular that I think the Florida fans are really going to hang their hat on. Ratliff says, hey, Mullen was at Florida back when Florida was good, but more importantly, he was at Florida back when Florida had an offense. He was the offensive coordinator that created that. That, I think, puts pressure on Mullen to be good offensively in 2018, but that narrative is the narrative that's going to emerge here that Florida fans and the Florida administration, the Florida program is going to push. Mullen's bringing offense back to Florida.
Oh, listen, I don't think we talk enough about Dan Mullen being under Urban Meyer. I really don't. We talk all the time about Jeremy Pruitt and the Saban thing. We talk about Kirby Smart. We talk about Will Muschamp. Urban Meyer's a guy who won a couple national championships himself. He's won at 2 different schools as well, which to me is kind of the benchmark of really being an incredible coach and really being a top 10 coach of all time, in my opinion. So the fact that Dan Mullen was under him, and I think that's a great point bringing it back up. When's the last time you felt great about Florida's offense? You do go back to that Urban Meyer kind of 08 team that really won the national title and did some great things. He knows the chemistry and the makeup it's going to take to be successful there.
Rick Keene says, I listened to the podcast. He talked about how other coaches wouldn't allow former players any access to the school with recruiting. That ends up hurting Florida. I do think embracing your former players is a key to success. That former players typically have some NFL money they can donate to the program sometimes, but also just that good vibe. It's important to create good vibes. And having former players hanging around, former players saying good things about you, that creates good vibes.
Listen, there's no doubt about it. When you talk about, you know, guys at Florida, when you talk about Emmitt Smith being down on the sideline at Florida, when you talk about some of the other players from the other schools around the country that have their players on the sideline that are amped up, that are, you know, have towels they're twirling around their hands, that's a good look for that team. That recruits watch that on TV and say, oh man, that's where Emmitt Smith went to school. That's where, you know, so and so went to school, and that's something that builds in the right direction. So I have to completely agree there.
All right, Adam number 8 here on our SEC Country Life First and 10. I think this is really cool because we talk about recruiting on this show, but the truth is, well, he has, I haven't. None of us really know what it feels like to be on the inside for one of these in-home visits when coaches show up at your house and hang out and try to pitch you on the University of Georgia or any other program, and that might be the case. In this case, it is Georgia that we're talking about here because Kirby Smart, the Georgia coaches, go in-home last night with four-star defensive tackle Rick Sandage from up in North Carolina. Sandage's mom, Keisha Sandage, caught a lot of this on video and was streaming it out on one of the social mediums. And like I said, you've experienced this. You had in-home visits. You had coaches over for dinner. The rest of us don't see this, but you do get a bit of a window into what some of this kind of stuff is like. So here's Keisha Sandage, some of her video with Georgia coach Kirby Smart in their house last night.
Man, Rick been there.
Hey y'all, we got home visit tonight. Wait a minute, it's on me. He over there got the peace sign up already. Okay, we got Jonas Jennings in the building.
How we doing?
We got Coach Smart in the building. All right, wait a minute. We got Rick back there.
That's like a permanent. The rivals for being top 100.
So this is Sandage's bedroom.
And,
Man, this is some serious inside look.
This is inside stuff, yeah.
This is like an E60 or 30 for 30 or something, right?
I don't get to see this. This is what it's like.
That's cool.
Because we told him to clean his room.
So anyway, that's probably. So now you got Smart holding up the poster for Rick Sandage there from Concord High School. Jonas Jennings, by the way, the other coach there, he's Georgia's player personnel director. But that's kind of a cool look at what these in-home visits are like. Maybe a little bit of an awkward way from Kirby Smart, but you know what? It ain't any less awkward than Nick Saban doing the electric slide or whatever he was doing the other day.
I think it's so funny. Like put the camera on Kirby Smart, and Kirby does this thing like with his shirt. If y'all can roll that back one time, I'd love to see that again. I mean, it was like I'm not sure what to do with my hands. But
there is always that I'm not sure to do with my hands type of thing that happens.
But I love it. Kirby's the guy that can roll with it.
And listen, we're doing a live show here. My hands are flying all over the place the whole time.
It was like, hey, I'm going to pick up my hand
let's watch
here, and
this.
I'm not sure.
There's Sandage again. Probably wouldn't kill Kirby to hit the fake tan a little bit. I mean, I know it's wintertime, we're all a little pasty. Maybe a little tan.
Listen, if he was too tan, you'd be like, why is this guy not watching more film? Why is this guy not?
That's a good point. You'd be hammering on the other side if that be the case. But something else does come out of that video. Sandage's mom talking about her son Rick, who's by the way going to choose between likely Georgia and South Carolina, talking about how clean he keeps his room. I was able to pull the audio up of this, and this is, I sort of boosted the audio from the video that you just saw of her talking about his clean room. Does she tip off the college choice for Rick Sandage? Take a listen and tell me what you think.
Well, we be sure trying to make him keep that room clean.
I like it though. I'm gonna tell you, right now he beating some of my freshmen on campus.
But when he get there though, it's gonna be a totally different story. Let me tell you. When we be on these visits and he get his own room, you should see that room. Because nobody ain't telling him to clean it. I went to the Shrine Bowl for a week. You should see that room.
What we just talking about?
So that's the audio from the video where she talks about, hey, he keeps his room clean, and when he gets there, it's going to be a totally different story. Now, listen, it should be pointed out that Sandage is probably not a point spread favorite to go to Georgia, probably thought to be a South Carolina lean. Do you read anything to what Sandage's mom said there? Is that just a slip of the tongue, or is that a Freudian slip of the tongue?
I think it's a little slip of the tongue, and maybe you can read something into it. I do find it funny. I mean, we are definitely in the dog days of recruiting right now when we're talking about his mom cleaning his room and who he's talking to and where he's going to go to school. To me, that signifies more to me than just, hey, when he gets there. To me, that tells me that she has a relationship with those coaches, and I think that's an inside look to me why Georgia's been so successful.
And she also put out another video, it was funny. She put out another video. We don't have this one. I didn't have a chance to pull it because it came relatively late before we started the show. But she pulls another video reacting to the video from last night. One of the things she said is the Georgia coaches are making the decision hard. Some other Georgia fans sort of took that to mean, well, maybe he's truly going to go to South Carolina if she's describing their interaction last night as making the decision hard. Maybe some Georgia fans kind of took that as hey, this is going to be tough to say no to these guys.
Yeah, I think it's definitely one of those read between the line types of things, and you just never know really until that guy steps in front of the microphones. And we've seen some crazy signing day type deals where some coaching staffs made it hard, and these guys just go away for 3 or 4 days, and they emerge, and all of a sudden they pick a guy. So. Talking about the room being clean, I don't know if that's a signal, but I think the fact that she says they're making it hard to me, but she's not the one making the decision too, is another scary thing to look at. It's like, Yeah, she thinks it's making it hard, but how much does she really know what's going on in his head?
Well, listen, let me tell you something. Most of these recruiting situations, you got to win over mama to have any chance winning a player.
100%.
Item number 9 here in SEC Country Live, our first and 10. So our buddies from over at Druid City Brewing, they're in Birmingham, have struck again with a brand new Nick Saban mural. This time a play on a Simon and Garfunkel album. Now, for the people that work with us in the show, much younger, so this is the old one from the other day. This is Nick Saban kind of in the sort of Outkast mold. Outkast, of course, the popular hip-hop group. So this is the one that I like. Saban kind of looking like Outkast. This is the one I'm not so sure about. Bear Bryant and Nick Saban kind of playing off a Simon and Garfunkel album. You see the Simon and Garfunkel album down at the bottom here. This is like Mrs. Robinson, people like that, songs like that. That's what Simon and Garfunkel are famous for. Bridge over troubled water. It says bridge over tidal water in the back there. This almost feels disrespectful to Bear Bryant and Nick Saban just a bit. It also is not nearly as cool as the Outkast mural.
No, it's not as cool as the Outkast mural. And when I first looked at this one, I thought, man, everybody already makes enough jokes about how short Nick Saban is. Why do you got to put Bear Bryant looking dead over his head? Like there's just no struggle at all.
That's the way that Garfunkel is standing in front of.
But it's like you said, a lot of young people don't even understand what that even is. So they probably had to put the album next to it just so people were like, okay, this is what we're dealing with.
I think for me, I'm going to go solid thumbs up for the Outkast parody. I'm going to go solid thumbs down for the Simon and Garfunkel. First of all, Simon and Garfunkel's 100 years old. Nobody.
That's kind of my point is that people get the Outkast thing. Nobody gets the Simon and Garfunkel. They just think that Bear Bryant's staring over the top of Nick Saban.
R.J. Raines says it's disrespectful to Outkast. Maybe so. Cliff Nelson says looks a little sketchy to me. So Esteban Esteves says hashtag so fresh and so clean. LOL, not going to hate that. Sweet. So listen, even an LSU fan likes the Outkast.
Yeah.
The Simon and Garfunkel. I don't know who you're pleasing with that.
Yeah, Mickey Elliott says Bear whispering in his ear saying change quarterbacks and Nick change quarterbacks.
That's pretty funny actually. Item number 10 here on our SEC Country Live first and 10, and for what I guess is the third day in a row, we're going to talk about that Missouri-South Carolina fight once again. So the gals get into a fight this week. None of us had a problem with that. We think that happens sometimes in competitive sports, but we've had all heck break loose since then. Missouri accused the South Carolina students of spitting and hurling racial slurs. Ray Tanner found those claims unsubstantiated. Dawn Staley, who you and I both sided with yesterday before she made her public statement on this. After her public statement comes out, I think we're going to be more solidly in her corner here. I really like what Staley had to say here. Once again, sort of sticking up for South Carolina fans. She says, if I could uproot my fans and place them in any other arena, that coach would be tremendously proud. I stand by our fans, by the way they cheer, by every single thing they bring to the arena. So she's essentially telling Missouri to kick rocks here, and I like Staley on this. I love her sticking up for her fans over the accusations unfounded coming from Missouri.
No, I completely agree with you, and it's kind of falls back to what I was saying. You can just take these shots. It doesn't seem you can put any name on the university you want to. Go to any sporting event. You can take shots at the other fan base, but to me, I just felt like Missouri went too far. It was like, I need to see, if you're going to say something that substantial, I've got to see some kind of proof of it. And maybe that's wrong. Maybe you should err on the side of caution, and maybe you should say, take these student athletes at their word. But if you're going to make that kind of accusation against somebody like Dawn Staley that is nationally recognized, then you need to have something substantial to back it up.
And the tie-in here is the Missouri AD had said that Staley had created what essentially he described as an unsafe atmosphere that she had. I don't quite know what had led up to this to sort of make him say that they'd been hyping this game for a while, her wanting to see the crowd make a bunch of noise. I don't really know what causes that, but his suggestion was, really an accusation was, that she had sort of fostered an atmosphere that led to.
Yeah, I can't remember what it was.
None of us would be obviously in favor of any kind of like spitting or slurs. And that's disgusting. That would be terrible. But the point here is there's no proof that anybody from South Carolina actually did it. And Dawn Staley, by the way, doesn't seem to think it happened because she's sticking up for her fans. In this case, I think Staley's doing the right thing.
I do too. And listen, this is a fan base tonight. Women's basketball at South Carolina is, I think, hosting UConn tonight. They're going to be fun. They're going to be on a national stage. Number one, UConn's coming in. It's all these crazy things that these two teams have been through for the last couple of years. So I think today it was important for her to release something like this to try to get that school back on track.
Yeah, Kevin Blackman says we need the tape. Yeah, listen, there's tape of everything now. In this particular case, I find myself once again saying that I'm on the side of South Carolina and Dawn Staley when it comes to this. All right, here on SEC Country Live, we're getting ready to close the show the same way every day. It's with our champion of life, and today, unfortunately, the champion of life involves some bad news for a beloved icon in the world of entertainment. You may have heard of Red Panda, the legendary halftime performer at both NBA and college basketball games. Well, Red Panda, the famous unicycle that she rides upon when she flicks those bowls up and they land on the top of her head. In fact, we'll come back to the tweet. Can we see Red Panda in action to give people an idea of what she does? So this is from an Auburn basketball game. This is Red Panda in action. So she's kind of riding back and forth on the unicycle. She puts the bowls down there on the foot here. And then watch what's going to happen here. Many of you have seen this before.
I think she gets up to 5. I think she does 5.
This is amazing. I mean, you can watch. I mean, most of the time, halftime is for like concession stands and everything else. But the entire student section remains seated. They remain in the building. Everybody wants to see what Red Panda brings to the table here. She's about to get them placed, and then you're going to hear a huge eruption and a roar when Red Panda gives them what they came to see here. Hands free, 1 foot on the unicycle. I can't believe I'm giving play-by-play for Red Panda. But I sort of wish she would sort of hurry up and get to the money here because we've got to get ready to roll on.
Up there.
All right, come on, Panda.
Here we go.
All right, here we go. I mean, look at that.
I mean,
that's amazing. So that's Red Panda's like whole gimmick, and she thrills crowds everywhere she goes until the folks apparently in Baton Rouge. I'll show you that tweet one more time. The folks in Baton Rouge apparently lost their unicycle. Because they tweeted out, Tiger fans around the world, please help us locate Red Panda's unicycle. I mean, you don't want to be the school that lost Red Panda's unicycle, do you?
No, it's not. They didn't lose it. I think that what happened is this thing got stolen.
She brought it there. That's even worse.
This thing got stolen.
I'm trying to be kind and say it's lost.
This thing got stolen from like the airport or something, right? I mean, like I haven't really gone in depth on this, but I was under the impression it got stolen from the airport.
So they're offering a reward, like some food and things like that.
Yeah, a couple $1,000.
Folks in Baton Rouge, find Red Panda's unicycle. Can we get her back on the road again and doing what people love?
There's just nobody like Red Panda. I mean, she's been around to like every arena in the United States and has done this act at halftime. Everybody knows her.
All right. Hope you know us as well. We'll see you back here again on Monday. If you missed a portion of our show today, you can check it out in podcast form. It's up for you on iTunes and SoundCloud immediately after the show. And it'd be a huge help to us if you'd share the show with your friends on Facebook. Let them know we're talking about the SEC each and every afternoon here on SEC Country Live. Tell them to come in here and give me grief like the rest of y'all do. It'll be fun. We'll see you back here again on Monday, 3 p.m. Eastern Time for another episode of our program. Talk to you then right here on SEC Country Live.